Hey, lead learners, welcome to the Learning Lab, the podcast dedicated to empowering educational leaders like you to lead with capacity, competency, and confidence. I'm Dr. Lisa Weir, aka Lead Learner Lisa, and I am your host, and in each episode, we'll explore the latest trends, insights, and strategies to help you navigate the ever-evolving landscape of education. Whether you're a seasoned administrator, an aspiring principal, or a teacher leader, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration and practical advice. We believe that strong leadership is the cornerstone of successful schools and thriving students, and we are here to support you on your journey. Join us as we dive into conversations with visionary educators, share real-world success stories, and provide actionable tips to enhance your leadership skills. Together, we'll build a community of lead learners committed to making a lasting impact in education, changing lives, and making futures one mind at a time. So let's get started and lead the way to a brighter future for our students and our schools. Hey, lead learners. I'm Dr. Lisa, and I'm excited to have Helena Parks join me in the Learning Lab. Helena has over 22 years of experience in HR, mostly in education and nonprofit-related workforce development. Helena has a bachelor's in communications and a master's in human resources management. Helena is a certified SHRM practitioner. Helena is a big proponent of developing cultures and climates that are built on equity, accountability, and compliance. Helena aims to create a workplace where employees feel valued and they want to come to work. Helena, welcome, and thank you for joining me in the Learning Lab.
I am so happy to be invited to this space, Dr. Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear some of your tips and words of wisdom relative to supervision of staff, specifically speaking, addressing performance and behavior concerns relative to corrective action, and also as a leader or a supervisor, how to really balance praise and accountability. When I think about leadership, it's probably one of the more challenging aspects of leadership is the component related to supervising and holding individuals accountable. But really, that's a lot of what the job is and is a big responsibility. So, can you just share some of your thoughts relative to that and maybe just give some tips? Because I know a lot of leaders sometimes find that to be challenging.
Sure. And again, thank you for having me. This is a great platform to share helpful information to your lead learners. And so I think what gets lost in the sauce sometimes is school, any companies, right? We need great talent. And so we do all that we can to recruit for the best talent that we can afford, right? And so we get talent in the door. And then we just expect them to just sink or swim a lot of times. We put them in these positions, we hand them a job description. Here's what you need to do, have at it. Right? Most companies are very much understaffed. And so we need people to get into the job and get busy right away. And there's validity in that. But I think that that becomes very concerning. It's to our detriment to just rush employees into action, into the day-to-day grind of workforce and the duties that are involved in their jobs. And so part of my role as an HR practitioner and a leader for my team is to just help us to understand what our leaders need, but what do our employees need, particularly our newer hires who are fresh in the door. They're trying to get acclimated to the climate. They want to learn. They're eager. They're hungry. They want to be successful. That's my opinion, right? Based on my experience. Most people don't get up in the morning thinking, how can I screw up today? Right? How can I make my leader's job difficult today? What can I do to get myself in hot water today?
Right.
Most people don't wake up thinking that way. Most people get up with an attitude of gratitude and expectation that this is a new day. I'm going to tackle it. I'm going to do great. I want to please my supervisor. Most people want to please their supervisor. They want to do well by the kids when it's in the school setting. And they want to do well by the customer or the people that they're serving, even if it's not, for instance, a kid. It could be patients or customers in a restaurant. we want to do well by the people we serve. And so part of my role is to help leaders to understand that and to help to foster a climate where they can help their employees be successful. Because when we're able to understand the why do we need our employees? Yes, we need them to be the boots on the ground to execute the work, but we need them to actually move our vision forward, our mission forward. You can't really do that without people. And so you want your people to be engaged. You want them to feel like they're successful, that they have the tools that they need to be equipped to do their job well, right? Not just do the job substandardly, but do the job to a set standard that hopefully you've laid out, that the expectations are clear. They want to do well. And so part of my job is to help our leaders to build up their workforce. Once they get the people in the door, what do we do with them? Well, we help them to be successful. So that's part of my role.
A lot of great information there. You talked about getting lost in the sauce and sink or swim. And I think about when an employee first starts, and I can even think about jobs that I've had, whether that's teaching at a university, whatever that job might be. They show you to your office, give you your computer, your books, show you where your classroom is, where your office is going to be, and say, oh, let me know if you need anything. And really, at that point in time, you do need something. And so there's a lot that you talked about there that I want to touch on, but I want to start with onboarding. So when you have that new employee and you've identified them because they are someone that has the skill, the will, the attitude, and that you feel will add value to your organization, you want to set them up for success. What tips can you give leaders, regardless of if it's a school or any organization, as far as onboarding new staff? What does that look like?
Sure. I would say that far too often leaders rely too heavily on HR, right? Sometimes leaders forget HR, we're not the employer of these individuals coming in the door. You are, right? We bring them in the door. We help to equip them with new hire orientation. New hire orientation does not equate to mastery. It's orientation. It's getting people acclimated. It's getting people familiar. It's introducing people to the company's mission, the company's climate, the culture values, all of the things we go over, the benefits, and all of those introductory fundamental things that every employee should know. Why? Because, of course, we want to get them ingrained in the culture, get them familiar, get them comfortable, get the feet wet, if you will. But whether we want to admit it or not, new hire orientation serves as a checklist and it serves as an accountability tool, right? We hold people accountable. We send them an employee handbook, for example. What is the expectation, right? The expectation is there's an acknowledgement form there. Hey, review and sign this.
Mhm.
Even when they haven't even read the full thing because it's like an encyclopedia, right? Who's reading the new hire, the employee handbook? But we want that you to sign it and we want it in your file because it's an accountability tool in the event, right, that some things should occur. We have that reference to say, well, you reviewed the employee handbook, you signed that you acknowledged it and that you reviewed it and you agreed to its terms. And so that is an accountability tool. People like to soften it up, but in some ways you can't. It's very black and white. But we want you to learn because we want these tools to be of benefit to you. We want you to learn, but make no mistake about it. These things are meant for the companies to check a box to say, this is what we introduced to this employee. So if there's something that is misaligned down the line, we have this documentation that supports that. We've done our due diligence to say, this is what this is. It's your responsibility to review. So I think that a mistake that is made with many leaders is that the expectation is that through new hire orientation, the employee is supposed to know all, master all, memorize all, and just go to town the next day or the next week and just be great. And so, my advice to leaders would be to make sure that you have a departmental specific onboarding plan that you have so that once the employee is yours, they've moved from HR and that initial onboarding and new hire orientation phase to you, that you have a clear outline of what you intend to show this employee who now reports to you, right? What does this look like? All of the different policies that are related to the department or the company, how to do X, Y, and Z, the various systems that need to be put into play because we need systems in order to perform tasks.
Mhm.
So How does this look? So everything needs to be very thought out and itemized on a checklist, and it becomes your responsibility unless you have a designee. But as a leader, it becomes your responsibility to sit with your employee to say, let's go over this today. This day will look like that. Onboarding is ongoing. It cannot be just 1 day, 2 day, 1 2 week. At minimum, a reasonable orientation should go through about 90 days. That is reasonable. And some companies will even dare to say 6 months. And to me, that's reasonable depending on the climate and what it is that the company is all about. But the onboarding phase is just that, it's an introductory period. Yes, you should have expectation that a person can perform the job. You hired them based on a certain skill set or what have you. But it doesn't mean that they know your way of doing things or the company's way. It's your responsibility to get them there. And then once they're there, it's only then where you can truly say, I've done what I need to do as a supervisor. It doesn't mean that you take hands all the way off. But what it does do is it says you've taken the time, you sat with this employee, you've documented it. That's important too. That you've equipped this person with what they need to manage the day-to-day things, recognizing that other things will happen that you might need to guide them on through the fire, if you will, right? That's how we learn. Everything can't be scripted. I get it. But wherever possible, there should be an itemized checklist that is documented, that you walk through X, Y, and Z with this employee on this particular day. If they need to revisit it, so be it. You do it however many times it's necessary so that your employee gets it, because that's how you build a team. That's how you build their capacity so that if you're absent, you need to go out on leave, whatever the case may be, they can handle the task at hand. Things won't fall apart in your absence. And it also lends to your legacy. What are you doing when you leave, whether you retire or what have you? How are you building up the people who came behind you? How are you paying it forward? It is not working or just teaching from behind a computer. It's hands-on. It's being in the grind with them. It's helping them to just learn what they need to be successful. You want to build up their capacity so that they can operate and fly out of the nest on their own. They don't need mama bird or
Mhm.
papa bird after so long. They may need you here and there, but overall, they can fly on their own. That to me is the mark of a good supervisor, when you're able to do that. And so, again, that's part of HR's job. If you are a sound HR practitioner, you get it, and you want to help your leaders to build up the plan. So you're sitting with them, you're meeting with them, helping them to develop their plan, because there's things that you, as the HR person, you may not know. There may be some specific department specific things that you are not well versed in. And
Mhm.
so that gives the opportunity for you and the partner to collab and say, well, let's play off each other. This is what you want to teach them from an HR, from a compliance piece, but then this is what they need to learn from a departmental stand piece or customer service stand piece or what have you. You combine those two, I think it becomes like a win-win dynamic where the employee feels like, wow, this company is really invested in my success. They're not just like you said, here's your office or here's your computer, have at it. You got questions, I'm down the hall, first door on the right, but your door is always closed and whatever, send me an email. So that's my 2 cents. And I ramble because I'm very passionate about that, because to me, through my experience, people leave typically next to salary, looking for getting an opportunity that pays more. They leave because of their dynamic with their immediate supervisor. Studies continue to show that. When you feel heard, when you feel respected, when you feel like your leader cares enough about you to sit you down to say, this is what you need to do, let me show you the way, right? You're more inclined to stay with that leader, even if you're offered something with a little bit more money, because you feel so valued and heard and equipped to be successful where you are, that you're like, no, they may pay a few dollars more, but here I feel like I can be successful, that there is a growth plan, there is room for me to continue to grow, that I feel like I'm constantly engaged. So I feel like this is where I want to be.
You gave a lot of great tips, and I want to walk back just a few things you said. When I think about the orientation piece with human resources and really differentiating that from orientation or onboarding that is ongoing, right? That's not a compliance step. That onboarding is building that capacity for that person to be able to perform the job well. I also heard you speak to how important onboarding and support is. And so I often teach a HR class to educational leaders, and I talk to them about onboarding being one of the first couple of steps in retention. And I believe the first step in retention is hiring. And I want to talk to you about that in just a second. But how someone is onboarded and set up for success can predict their retention rate with your company. Oftentimes, people leave in the first few months because they don't feel supported. They don't feel like they got that proper onboarding. Another thing you really spoke about when you were just really identifying the different reasons that people will leave a job, and you basically, to sum it up, identified lack of support or that lack of that quality relationship with your leader or your direct supervisor. And when we think about reciprocal accountability, is something I really like to talk about, is where we hold people accountable for their roles and responsibility, but the reciprocal piece is the leader and the supervisor have to provide the support and the capacity for the person to be successful in making sure that they fulfill their roles and their responsibilities. So I really love that. I do want to also get to the corrective action, performance concerns, and also balancing the praise and accountability piece. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the hiring process. I know for sure in schools, there are teacher shortages in many of the organizations, especially coming out of COVID, just really being able to find the person that's the right fit for a position and hiring. And so just recently I had a conversation with the superintendent who was supporting a principal on a teacher hire. And the teacher reviewing the resume, and were there red flags on the resume? And yes, there's some red flags on the resume. There were some red flags getting the references. The interview may have gone okay, but there were red flags. And having this conversation about balancing, yes, you need to have an employee to fulfill the role that you need, in this case, a teacher in the school, but rushing to do that, hiring fast out of desperation, is only going to mean more time that you spend either interviewing or in corrective action or in offboarding this person. What tips can you give in regards to just being really intentional about that hiring process and not just finding the best person out of a group of applicants, but finding the right person?
Sure, a couple things. So I think that for one, being incredibly honest about the role, right? Too often, leaders sugarcoat the challenges that come with the job. They sugarcoat the expectations that come with the job. They make these blanket statement, pie in the sky type statements about the company as if the company is just so perfect and that every day is just blue skies and birds singing and everything is perfect, right? And some people actually buy into that, right? Good, bad, indifferent, whatever. A lot of people are very idealistic, and so people will like to think that it's great. Might have some off days, but this is a great company and all the things. And it could very well be overall a really good company to work for. But make no mistake about it, every company has its stuff. It has the things, it has its challenges, it might have its politics. And so we don't want to sugarcoat the challenges. I'm not saying air all the quote unquote dirty laundry, right? But I am saying be upfront about the good, the bad, and the not so attractive. Because what you don't want to do is sell this kind of pipe dream, if you will, and this person gets on board and the reality kicks in and they're just like, they sold me just something that was completely just false. This is not it. And so you lose people that way. I hear that often, or I've heard that often through exit interviews and surveys for people who are willing to complete them, that they believe that they were told something that was completely different from what the reality was once they started. And so I just think that number one, just be upfront, be honest, even from the job posting. Be very honest about the position, as honest, as forthright as you possibly can be. So that's one thing. And I think another thing is just really telling them what the mission is, because many people are driven by money, and there's nothing wrong with that. We have to live. People have mortgages, families, all of the things. But then you have a lot of people who, while money is important, so is the mission and the alignment and being part of something that's much bigger than ourselves. And so I think that it would behoove companies to really kind of sell, if you will, for lack of a better word, the mission, and try to get people who are very mission aligned, who really believe in something bigger than themselves, that they're willing to come aboard to be part of your mission or your company's mission. But I do think that a mistake is in the advertisement, making it seem like things are so great and all of these pluses or what have you. And then the interview comes and you're still just selling this company. You're not being completely forthright, because the company could be very well great, as I said, but let them know what the challenges are. And I don't even think that you should wait until and have them ask you. You should be upfront to say, now, understand that we have this great benefits package and the great hours, and you're working with some great kids, but let me also tell you about some of the challenges that the average teacher here faces, or the average staff here faces, because I want you to really understand what your clientele is, that you can make a more informed decision. Benefits is another piece, because you want them to get an understanding of the total rewards. And so a lot of people really gloss over the benefits. And then when they get in the door and they realize that maybe the benefits to them is outrageously high, they can't afford it, and they end up leaving because they're like, if I opt for your benefits, that is going to take most of my take home pay. So I think that letting them know about what to expect in terms of benefits shouldn't wait until the offer letter is drafted. I think that you should be upfront and let them know about your benefits and what you offer and what you don't offer. If it's competitive, great. Give them the opportunity to review maybe your benefits guide for your top candidates. So I'm not suggesting just share it out for
Mhm.
everyone, but maybe for your top candidates, just helping them to learn more about the total rewards. And that can help offset the salary that may not be as glamorous, right, or as sexy as maybe the competitor. But
Mhm.
because you have a winning benefits plan, or that's competitive, that might sway a person to say, I think that that might be really good for me to, they offer these things. So that's great. So those are just a couple of the things that I can think of just off top. Being transparent to the degree possible, right? And just really emphasizing all of the various positive things about the organization. I think that that might go a long way in helping to retain individuals. And having the leader do a lot of the reaching out too, especially to the top candidates, not necessarily just leaving it to HR, because you're establishing that relationship at jump. I
Mhm.
think that is winner chicken dinner. It goes a
Mhm.
long way
Yeah.
and into engaging your newer hires and saying, wow, she took time, our superintendent or our principal, not that anything's wrong with HR, we're great,
Mhm.
but the principal took time to call me, to email me, or what have you. That's a big deal. That can make people feel special. I know it would make me feel special to have my actual potential supervisor reach out to me in addition to, or as opposed to, an HR representative.
I love that. I love what you said about being transparent about the challenges, because some people will have fears about sharing that they might scare someone off. However, if you're being honest and sharing the challenges, you can, in tandem with that, share how you, as a supervisor, are providing the support and what your vision is for turning around those challenges, or how you're going to support this person with those challenges. And that really helps. And then the benefit piece, a lot of times, especially when you look at salaries, I just think about times that when I was looking at a job and a job offer was made to me and they said the salary was X, Y, and Z. And then I said, okay, well, is there phone reimbursement? Do you have pet insurance? Can I see your benefit plans? How much do you, if any, give to a retirement plan? And then I create a spreadsheet and put it all out there and add the math up. And sometimes those jobs with the larger salary, when you take it and you look at what you're paying towards benefits, or maybe what you're not getting towards retirement, the job with a little bit less or is the job that is really the math works out to be better. And I was just having a conversation with someone about a job I had years ago where they offered pet insurance. And that was the talk of the company because so many people are pet mom and dads, and going to the vet was is really expensive, but it was a really inexpensive thing for the organization to get pet insurance for the employees. And it really boosted a lot of people's thoughts about how they really care about us, they care about our pet family, and how it was another benefit, even if it wasn't necessarily with the salary piece of that. So I think those were some really good tips that you gave about
Can I add?
hiring.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Because you mentioned that too often leaders are fearful of sharing the not so attractive. But let's put it another way. Which would you rather have? You have to pick what's the poison here. I would rather tell the person and have them decline. Therefore, I'm not wasting their time or mine
Right.
for the fact versus them getting in the door, finding it out the hard way, and then they're like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And then you've wasted hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in onboarding, drug screens, background checks, all of the things. And for what? Right? All because you may have glanced over or fudged some things about your company or about the client and what to expect. So I would rather know this person, they're not for us. That's great. It's kind of like dating, right? I just would rather know up front, just be honest about it, and then allow me to make an informed decision. That to me, again, it's about respect. So the person is like, they're real is a good thing.
Mhm.
Because just like you're not for everybody, understand that everybody is not for you. Everybody is not for your team. Everybody is not for your culture and your company. And it's best to know that up front.
Absolutely. And I love the analogy to the dating. And I often share with leaders that I coach, or maybe it's in a leadership class, I talk about that whole piece about they are during the interview, they're interviewing you too, especially nowadays. They're trying to determine if they're the right fit. And if they don't have all of the information, then it's hard for them, or they're getting incorrect or half information, then it's hard for them to tell if this is the right fit for them as well. Because if they can determine as best they can through that process that this is a good fit for me, so the job is offered and they accept, or this is not a good fit for me, so they decline, that's going to be better for everyone. You don't have to go through that divorce or that breakup, right? Um,
Yes.
when you think about that dating. So great advice. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
So I want to talk about the difficult stuff. I think new leaders and leaders, regardless of if it's schools or other organizations, when it pops up and someone's having performance issues, which I see a little bit different than behavior issues, or you're looking at maybe having to offboard someone, share some wisdom and some tips around corrective action and holding people accountable.
Sure. So, wherever possible, corrective action, particularly formal corrective action, and some companies refer to it as disciplinary action. I frown upon that in this day and age because as an adult, I don't really need nor want to be or feel disciplined as though I'm a child.
Mhm, mhm.
And so the connotation of that is rather negative, even though it might, in hindsight, factual, right? But I like to refer to it, and I work for a wonderful organization that supports that formal corrective action, right? And so, wherever possible, formal corrective action, it should not come as a surprise to the employee. When that happens, then that means that as a supervisor or a leader, you failed in some way, shape, or form, wherever possible. Now, again, there might be some things that happen that were completely unexpected, something, and those are usually rather egregious actions, right? That are just wow. But for the most part, especially as it relates to performance, formal corrective action shouldn't come as a surprise to the employee if, as a supervisor, you have done your part. Whenever supervisors or leaders come to me and they're ready to push that button, and when I say push that button, that typically means termination, separation from employment. It's not even formal corrective action. Let me give them some type of form of documentation, or people refer to it as a write up. But I always will respectfully push back unless the evidence is just apparent and present that you can't help but say, wow, this is highly unsafe, or this presents great risk to the organization, so we need to act immediately. But a lot of times I'll push back to the leader because my question is always, okay, show me where you trained this person. Show me that documentation. A lot of times they can't provide it, Dr. Lisa. They can't. Or they'll say something like, well, I've talked to them before about it. Well, when did you talk to them? Where's that email?
Right.
Where's that text exchange? Where is the documentation? In HR, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And so it becomes very important to ask the questions and give the respectful pushback, not because you're trying to be adversarial, but you are really trying to protect everybody involved. Really, that's your job as an HR practitioner. If you're hired by a company, as I am, your job is multi-layered. You must protect the interests of the organization, but you also need to protect what's right. Sometimes it's the employee, sometimes it's the leader or the employer or rep, right? And so it becomes a true HR practitioner recognizes that it's a fine line. And so we move to be objective and fair. And so that's fair. Asking the employer rep, in this case, the supervisor, who's also an employee, because we all are, right? So you're asking the questions, well, can you show me that training? What did that look like? I'm going through their personnel record to see what type of policies they signed off on, that they acknowledged, or what have you. So it becomes an investigation, if you will. But if the feedback is, well, I'm just ready, they've done this and this on this date, I don't really have any documentation, but I've talked to them before, then it didn't happen.
Mhm.
That was an informal coaching that you can just chalk it up, take the L, because they're not going anywhere,
Mhm.
really. This can become an opportunity for you to now document the conversation, but this should have been happening from jump. Feedback is imperative, good, bad, and different. Providing your staff with timely feedback in real time is incredibly beneficial, because you are letting them know what they're doing well. And then if there's some challenges there, there's something that's not being done well, there's your opportunity to address and correct it and help them so that it doesn't continue. If
Mhm.
it continues and you've never addressed them, then you are just as much to blame as them, if not more so. Because why didn't you say something? You can't operate in this bubble where it's like, well, they're supposed to know. Sure, we can say that. Well, this person is an adult. Why wouldn't they know that? This is common sense. Well, common, we've learned, it's not always
Right.
common,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so we need to make sure that we are giving our staff as timely a feedback as possible. In the moment is ideal. When it can't happen, because sometimes there are instances where that's not feasible, because maybe they're speaking in a public forum, so you don't want to necessarily call them out publicly. But as soon as possible, that same day or the very next day, it should be very fresh, so that there can be no room for them saying, when did that happen? I don't remember, right? Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what just occurred in that meeting where you shouted at your coworker, or whatever the case may be. Or this documentation, I noticed that you submitted it. We went over some training recently, and it just appears that this doesn't align with the training that we had 2 weeks ago about this documentation, or this case management, or this lesson planning, or whatever the case may be. You want to address it so that there is awareness, and you want to help them to learn to correct it so that it doesn't continue to happen. Because if it continues to happen, then it's not really a mistake now, is it? Right? And so then it becomes like, well, we can't keep talking about this. At some point, there has to be some formal accountability, right? And accountability isn't always a negative thing. It's just letting a person know so that there's ownership. Some people are really good at owning their own, they're owning their stuff. Some people, they're not, whether they just don't want to admit that they are fallible or whatever the case may be. But as a leader, it becomes your responsibility to say, hey, let's talk about this. I noticed that this has happened a couple times now, and let's meet, because this is how it should be done. I recognize that this probably wasn't intentional, but this is the correct way to do it. Let's walk through it again. I know that we've trained on it before, but let's walk through it again so that we're on the same page. Show me your rationale behind it, or whatever. Maybe they honestly thought that their way was correct, or maybe they thought how they addressed someone was appropriate. It's your responsibility as a leader to not let it ride if you see something questionable or wrong. You don't have to berate the person. You don't have to go out of your way to make the person feel bad or lousy, but you have a responsibility as a leader to address behaviors or deficiencies, help them to feel those deficiencies so that they don't continue to happen. You document your efforts so that should it continue to happen, it become a pattern, then you can go about the business of holding them accountable in a way that they can say, yep, she gave me 3, 4 chances. It is what it is at this point. Odds are you're going to have a situation where the employee is going to be like, what? You haven't said anything, and now you're moving me to a final, or you want to fire me? Seriously? And most companies nowadays are at will employers. So technically, you might be able to, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should. And a lot of times you can get dinged because there's all types of ways. We live in a highly litigious society. And yes, people can say, yep, I signed the employee handbook and it says all these things about at will and this and that and the other. However, it doesn't give us just carte blanche to just do whatever we want to do and just terminate people without us doing our due diligence, without just cause, without us checking all of the boxes and trying to our best to remove the barriers and help our employees to be successful. And I think that in and of itself is something that is a fail within a lot of companies, because guess what? A lot of companies are promoting people into supervisory roles who aren't ready to be supervisors, right? Just because you were great in your capacity as a direct service personnel, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great leader. And I think that we do our people a disservice, because it's great to move people up and promote from within and all of the things, but how are we preparing our people to be good leaders?
Mm-hmm.
How are we equipping them to be good supervisors from moving from a peer to a supervisor? It's a completely different dynamic, as I know, because we've been there. So I could go on and on about different gaps that are present as to the whys, but the bottom line is it shouldn't be a surprise. It should rarely come as a surprise. And it should not be personal. It should be, this is the deficiency that we have continued to address. Unfortunately, it continues to occur. And so now we're at this space where there needs to be some formal accountability. And they might fight it, they might not, but I can guarantee you it won't be a surprise. They can't say, I didn't know. I didn't receive tons of training, tons of support. The barriers were removed to the best of my supervisor's ability. So, as you stated at the beginning of our conversation, it wasn't about my lack of skill, it was about my lack of will. And I have to own it and I have to take accountability for it. So,
You lifted up so many things, and especially thinking a lot of times a supervisor just gets frustrated and they go to HR and they feel like HR is battling them, but you're doing your job. You're helping the organization to make sure, number one, that they're doing the right thing. And you said that, but also to make sure that there's not going to be a lawsuit or something that comes back. Just because you're at will does not mean it's willy-nilly as far as being able to just let someone go. I also loved when you talked about just really addressing things right away, not letting them go on and on and on and giving that feedback. So I've had conversations before with leaders and they'll finally just, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. And I want this person gone, or I want to write this person up. This has just been going on. And what do you mean it's just been going on? They have been late for the last 6 months. They've been, wait a minute, we're 6 months into this. Where were we the second time or the third time in the first month when they were coming in late? Did you have a conversation with them? And then to your point, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. It's one person's word against another person's word. So some of the mistakes around thinking because they're at will, some of the mistakes of you're just too busy to address issues when they come up, and those mistakes around not documenting what you do as far as support, training, or addressing issues are things that can really get you in trouble when it comes to corrective action and addressing performance or behavior issues with staff. I've also heard some advice, and it really had me thinking and reflecting the difference between when an employee's issues are performance issues versus behavioral. So whether that's coming in late, or maybe you had an encounter with a coworker and you're yelling at that coworker, or it's something behavioral versus your capacity to perform your job responsibilities, which may require training. And I think sometimes the mistake I hear is someone being put on a performance improvement plan, corrective action plan, whatever you might call that, for a behavior issue. A behavior issue is this behavior is happening and this behavior needs to stop. And if it doesn't stop, this is what's going to happen next. And then it goes on to whatever your progressive discipline process is in regards to verbal, written. And if it's really egregious, it is either written or it may even be just immediate termination. And I think we really have to separate performance issues from behavior issues. And so many times I hear leaders and supervisors telling me about behavior issues, especially, and it finally just, they either had the time to address it or they're just tired of it. And they bring it to your attention, they bring it to HR's attention, they bring it to their supervisor's attention, and they want action. And to be honest, when we think about roles and responsibility, the role and responsibility of leaders and supervisors is to address those behaviors, is to build that capacity so people can perform in their roles. It's not your entire job. If you focused only on that all the time, the organizational goal, you don't have time for that. But it is a big part of your job because guess what? That impedes the organizational goals. If you're having people with performance or behavior issues, that's going to impact the ability to meet your goals. And so it reflects the leader's performance as well. And I don't say that to really be critical of leaders and supervisors because when you become a new leader, and I think it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 to maybe even 4 years to really get your feet and really understand whether it's finances and budgets related to your organization or your school, but also HR. But in that time, HR, number one, is your best friend. And really learning about that is going to be really important because you're going to run into people problems because you're working with people. And as a supervisor and a leader, you have to build your capacity and ability to address those.
Agreed wholeheartedly, Dr. Lease. And it's just one of those things where you're right. It's like the behavior piece is just a big a deal. A lot of times it can outtake performance deficiencies, right? Because you're dealing with humans and we come with various biases and attitudes and all of the things. And so, yes, behaviors definitely need to be addressed. I align with you in that it shouldn't be on a performance improvement plan. A lot of performance improvement plans, if done correctly, they can be a really great tool to help an employee address and rectify a performance deficiency if done correctly, as it should be. But if it's just a matter, let me just do some documentation and put these very lofty, unrealistic expectations and goals on here that most people are not going to, let alone this person who's demonstrated that they lack some of the skills needed to help to meet these goals. You're setting them up for failure. It's not fair to anyone involved. You're wasting time. You're wasting their time. It becomes one of these tools where it's just like, oh, let me just say I did it. Let me check this box so that I can say I did it and this person can be terminated or what have you. But definitely the behavior piece is a big deal across all entities. It doesn't matter what industry, because again, you're dealing with all of these various personalities coming together. And many adults, while we're able to put personal feelings aside and we understand that the workplace is not necessarily the place where you meet best friends, if it happens organically, fantastic. But the goal is to do your job well to serve your customers. But you need to make sure that you're also there to align with the company's culture. And as a leader, you're supposed to help your people get on board with the culture. And that includes certain behavioral patterns and mannerisms that are appropriate in that workplace setting. And so to me, that kind of aligns with the next portion, if you will, balancing the praise and the positive reinforcement with addressing the behaviors and the performance concerns. Because oftentimes leaders are so quick to just communicate and give feedback during the time of performance evals where you're listing deficiencies and all the things that's 6 months in or a year after they started, or they're quick to just address the negative things, the challenges, the deficiencies. But this person also has some great attributes. Are you giving them credit for that? Are you making them feel as though they're valued and that their work and what they're contributing is meaningful at all? you can lose people that way too,
Mhm.
right? Because people are relational. We want to feel involved. We want to feel part of something. And so, as a supervisor, it's your responsibility to not just hold people accountable, train them all the things, but how are you showing them praise? How are you showing them that they matter to you? You shouldn't leave that to HR. You shouldn't leave that to this president and CEO. They have their pieces in this, but really, your team, they're looking to you. What are you doing to make them feel like you care? Are you acknowledging them on their birthdays? Are you acknowledging them when they go above and beyond to deliver a work product, or when they take one for the team and they're rolling up their sleeves when everybody else is on a field trip or they're doing something fun and that person falls back because you're understaffed and they need to monitor? Just a number of things I can think of, but how are we praising and we are showing appreciation to our team to balance praise versus accountability? You're always holding them accountable, right? Always telling them what wasn't done to your standard. But when they do stuff right, just like a child, what are you doing to say that's great? That's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate you for doing that. Holding them up so that they feel like they're meaningful in the workspace. So that's a big deal too.
Meaningful and that they're being noticed, right? You have to be intentional about making sure you pause and take the time to notice the small stuff, the good stuff, because sometimes as human beings, we're prone to just notice the negative things. I also like what you said just a bit ago when you talked about, even before you started talking about the praise part, is that if we put someone on a performance improvement plan, corrective action plan, whatever that might be, we're showing that we're being genuine in trying to build capacity for them to be successful. Versus if the goal is just, okay, HR said that I needed documentation, so I'm going to put them on this plan so I can document, so I can offboard them. That's not the intention of that. The idea is to assume good intentions and provide that person with the capacity that they need to be successful and the resources and training that they need. And then at that point, like you said earlier, if it's not happening, then either it's not a good fit, they don't have those skills, they can't develop those skills, the capacity for those skills, or they don't have the will to do that. And then the praise piece, people need to know that they belong. People need to know that they're valued. The praise needs to be honest,
Mhm.
right? It needs to truly, and it needs to be individualized. If you're a leader and you're giving everyone the same praise, or you're just giving that general praise, which is great, you to give your staff that as well as a whole, but you're not individually touching base and letting people know as an individual you are a valued part of our organization, of our team. And here is why I value you. And here is how I notice you. Those are things that really will help with retaining and building, like you said, that relationship. And it really is a balancing act. It's a balancing act of holding individuals accountable, building capacity, your responsibility to make sure they have what they need, and then showing them that they're of value and giving them that praise. I don't want to say that adults are like little children. However, we have to make our kids go to bed on time so they can get up and eat their vegetables, or we redirect different behaviors of people in our lives because we have reciprocal expectations of how you want to be treated and how you treat other people. It doesn't make the praise, the value, or showing that you care about anybody any less. You need to be able to do both as a supervisor and as a leader. So, some great, I think I could talk about this for a long time. I even jotted down some other topics that came from this. So I know that I really need to have you back on here because my experience has been this is one of the heavier lifts, especially for new leaders, but even for seasoned leaders. That documentation piece and giving that feedback, because people are, things slowed down a little bit during COVID, but most of the time everything's moving so fast that people aren't pausing and taking the time to document and to give that feedback. So I really appreciate that. Lead learners, it is time to hang up our lab coats until next time. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Instagram at One Mind Ed Consulting LLC. Please like and share. Helena, thank you. This was, I think about my career, I think about questions I get from people that I coach or in classes that I teach. This is a hot topic. I thank you for joining me in the Learning Lab.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and I hope that you will come back soon. Actually I have a list for you now, and yeah, also
Not
the
good.
listeners can send in some more things because, like I said, this is a really hot topic. I do have a question before you leave. It's a new question I'm asking my podcast guests, and so Monday morning. Let's start with Monday morning, the beginning of the week, long weekend, restful weekend, and it's time to start your week off or kick your morning off. What is your preferred drink to start your day?
Oh, I'm all about the coffee. The
All,
stronger, the better.
all
All about it. I'm not gonna say I can't function, but I can't function. I need nice, strong coffee. That's how I start every day, really.
I am the same way. So, Helena, I hope that you will grab your coffee, your strong coffee, and join me and my other sipsters as I grab my very strong coffee for another weekly successful tip of the week. They come out every Monday. They're full of inspirational and practical tips relative to leadership, one word, one cup, and one sip at a time. Until next time, lead learners, it is time, like I said, to hang up our lab coats. I encourage you to lead, learn, and love, changing lives and making futures one mind at a time.